So today we are checking out this 40-year-old Canon 50mm lens that I got from my granddad. If you're a filmmaker, you know that many in this industry love the look of older vintage lenses. They're somewhat softer and generally have more character to them. We will be using two different adapters on the Fuji XH2S. One of the adapters is a focal reducer, so we can check if there's any interesting bokeh quality or character. The other adapter doesn't have any elements in it, so we can see what the optical performance is like. Just to give you a little backstory, and perhaps something to look forward to, when I finished my photography study and started working as a videographer back in the day, my granddad gave me his entire collection of vintage Canon lenses. They sat in a dusty container somewhere in my loft for far too long, but I just finished a good gig and thought I'd spend some cash on these adapters, allowing me to utilize them again. It's crazy to me how some things in this world seem to just break after a year or two, yet I'm still able to use this now 40-year-old lens. It just goes to show that investing in optics is most likely a better investment than investing in camera bodies, for example. Anyway, there are a ton more lenses in this collection, and I hope to create a form of vintage lens series for you, comparing these old-timers against some of the newer options available. When mounted on an APS-C camera like the Fuji XH2S using a focal reducer, it closely mirrors its original 50mm field of view. It excels in low light situations and can create a beautifully shallow depth of field. This lens, part of the Canon FD series, was first introduced in 1979 and remained in production until Canon shifted to the EF mount system in 1987. I independently acquired this one and the adapters used for this review. Both are solidly built, and we'll see how they affect lens performance in this video. You can check the links in the description for the most up-to-date prices on these adapters. Crafted from metal, this lens feels both solid and durable, weighing about 250 grams. It balances well on the Fuji XH2S, though the adapter makes it protrude more than on its original analog body. The lens sports a simple yet elegant design. Its focus ring, rotating about 300 degrees from infinity to minimum focus distance, is smooth and well damped. The aperture ring clicks in half stops from f1.8 to f22, producing a satisfying sound that's often missing in modern lenses. It isn't weather sealed, so caution is advised in harsh environments. It also lacks internal focus mechanisms, meaning the front element extends when focusing, but remains stable without any wobble. The lens exhibits noticeable breathing. This focus breathing doesn't seem to be impacted by the focal reducer, so that was quite interesting to see. The filter thread size is 52mm, compatible with many modern-day step-up rings and accessories. Note that on Fuji bodies, you must enable the shoot without lens option to use it, as the camera won't communicate with the lens or display information on screen or in the viewfinder. The lens has a minimum focus distance of 0.6 meters, which isn't extremely close, but sufficient for portraits or still life shots. The focus ring on this lens is smooth and precise, offering nice resistance and easy manual adjustments. You can also utilize the focus peaking or magnification features of the Fuji cameras for critical focus. The lens features a distance scale and depth of field scale, handy for zone focusing or hyperfocal distance techniques. Let's take a look at the image quality without the focal reducer. All the testing was done on my Fuji XH2S. There's no in-camera correction available for this lens, so this is just pure image quality. You can of course always enhance or correct some flaws in post if you want a cleaner look. At f1.8, initially you might find the image quite soft, especially at the center, with a hint of chromatic aberration peeking in the corners. As we stop down to f2.8, you'll notice a significant improvement in sharpness, both at the center and corners. Now, when we reach f4.0, the center sharpness is excellent, and even the corners get pretty sharp. Lowering the aperture to f5.6, both the center and corners looking incredibly sharp. However, at f8, keep an eye out for a bit of diffraction starting to show, particularly in the corners, but it's not too overwhelming. By f11, the diffraction is a tad more noticeable, yet the image quality still holds up impressively. For those who love ultra-sharp landscapes, stopping down to f16 could be a bit of a letdown. Here, diffraction becomes quite noticeable, affecting overall sharpness. This is even more pronounced at f22, where the image turns considerably softer due to heavy diffraction. Now let's put on the focal reducer and check the image quality at f1.8. The center image appears sharper with the focal reducer, yet the corners are incredibly soft. But as we stop down to f2.8, the center sharpness improves greatly, although some ghosting still lurks in the corners. Stopping down to f4 and f5.6 brings good news for center sharpness, which becomes quite impressive. The corners see some improvement too, but not as much as without the focal reducer. At f8, the center sharpness remains strong, but the corners don't show much progress. By f11, center sharpness is decent, yet the corners remain unchanged. Heading to f16, we start to see diffraction impacting the image's overall contrast. Interestingly, the corners seem to fare a bit better at this aperture. However, by f22, diffraction again takes a toll, reducing overall sharpness. Regarding distortions. Without the focal reducer, things look pretty neat, with minimal issues. You might spot a bit of barrel distortion, but it's hardly noticeable. With the focal reducer, vignetting becomes apparent, disappearing only at f2.8, and the barrel distortion becomes more noticeable. In our chromatic aberration test at 250% zoom at f1.8, both with and without the focal reducer, there's a visible presence of chromatic aberrations, though not as heavy as you might expect from a vintage lens. It does significantly decrease when stopping down to f2.8. Lastly, let's talk about the bokeh quality. Without the focal reducer, the bokeh is quite pleasing. With the focal reducer, however, it gets more interesting, creating a swirly effect, though not as pronounced as with a Helios lens, but still very characterful. It adds a unique look to the backgrounds, which I find quite appealing. Image stabilization. You're pretty much on your own here, as it of course doesn't come with built-in stabilization. This means you'll have to rely on your steady hands and the camera's IBIS if it has any. Take the Fuji XH2S for example. It's got 5-axis in-body image stabilization, which does a decent job of reducing camera shake and movement. But let's be real, it struggles a bit with longer focal lengths. Now, if you use a focal reducer, it seems to handle things a bit better, but it's not a complete game changer. The best use case I've found for IBIS is to reduce those micro jitters, which does make the image overall a lot more pleasing. Alright, wrapping things up, the Canon 50mm FD f1.8 is a real gem from the past. That characterful bokeh adds a touch of elegance to your shots. Its build quality is solid and sleek. And when it comes to using it, it has that Fuji character which makes you slow down, and it really brings the joy back into photography for me with its straightforward manual operation. As for the adapters I used, both of them are incredibly good, and for this lens, my preference goes to the Mitakon focal reducer, as it really unlocks that awesome bokeh. I will have full reviews for these adapters sometime in the future, but you'll be able to compare them with the comparisons provided in this video. You might also fancy the next video on the Canon FD 35-105, which is a lens design I really admire and hope manufacturers go back to, with its internal zoom and beautiful markings on the body. Feel free to check it out if you're interested. I hope this video gave you some insights and helped you out. If you liked it, smash that subscribe button or hit the like. I've got loads of other channels covering a bunch of different topics. You can find most of them on my homepage. Alright, hopefully see you in the next one.